Welcome to FlexieCast, the future of work unleashed. FlexieCast is your go-to podcast for diving deep into the evolving world of work, where flexibility, innovation, and opportunities converge.
Good morning, hello, and welcome. I have the honor and the privilege of sitting here today in one of our first episodes that I've been looking for some time now with the man himself, John Binkley. He's someone that I've known for a little bit of time now, and I just really truly appreciate who he is and the leader that he is and the president that he is from an executive standpoint, and just the example that he consistently sets. And he's not one who says things, he's one who does things to really show that he means what he's saying. And it's my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome you onto the show, one of our first ever episodes of FlexieCast, the future of work unleashed, where we discuss all things future of work. And this is one of the fitting topics to begin with, which is on the topic of leadership, because that's some place in an area where I think there needs a lot more needs to be done in general. And there's a transition that's happening, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this with you today, sir.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to be here, and really looking forward to having a great discussion with you. Absolutely.
So just quick background and overview on John Binkley. I'm honored and fortunate to also call him Big Brother. So he and I met, just fun fact and true fact, he and I met actually during a leadership development session, a 3-day leadership development training session. And we connected on levels that I didn't expect going in. And I'm truly grateful that we got the time to connect there, or we were fortunate to connect there. And then we've continued the conversation since. And I've watched you do and be someone that I've continued to admire and just respect even more so. The more I get to learn about you and the more I get to know about you from a family standpoint, a business person standpoint, and just all around good, great human being and great father, great husband, all things that I aspire to and I'm still working at. So thank you very much. I salute you. And man,
I'm humbled.
There's so much I can say. There's so much I can say.
I'm humbled.
But John, if you could please just introduce yourself, just briefly, tell the folks who you are, your path to where you are, your company, CRG Search, and
sure, yeah,
and your thoughts just overall about what has led you here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I run an executive search firm called CRG Search. I have been in the executive search business for over 23 years. I did an internship for an executive search firm my senior year of college, which would have been in the early 90s, I guess. This is before the internet was a thing. And there's a lot of interesting backdrop there that I won't get into, but we'll just say that one of my jobs as an intern was faxing resumes and then putting them in the mail. And we were cutting edge because we had a fax machine. So that was a long time ago, Arma. I decided I didn't want to be an executive recruiter. So I went to go work in corporate America for the next 10 years. Worked for some great companies. I worked for Monsanto, Fortune 50 company. I worked for ADP, Fortune 500 company. And during that time, learned a lot about leadership and about strategic mindset. And I was in sales and sales leadership roles. So I was trained at kind of the highest level, I'd say, in consultative selling and strategic selling, and started to have a family and was traveling a bit. And didn't want to travel a bit, wanted to be home with my family. And so I reached out to a good friend of mine, a guy named John Binkley, who was a family friend. We knew through church, and was really a leader in the executive search space. And I reached out to him to help me find a sales leadership role and or any other type of role, quite frankly, that would enable me to make the same or more income than I was making, but enable me to be home with my family and not have to travel the 3 nights a week that I was traveling. And John, being the consummate recruiter, spent about a year convincing me to come work for him. And so that's how I ended up getting into this business. And I'm really glad I landed with John's organization. He was running, he was part of at the MRI network that at the time they were the second largest recruiting firm in the world. They had 5,000 recruiters and 1,100 offices. And John Hinkle had started and was running a top 5 global office for the second largest recruiting firm in the world. So he was a wonderful mentor, great person to learn this business from. And he put me into a leadership role. So I had an opportunity not only to learn kind of the business tactically and strategically as a solo producer, but then eventually build my own team and then eventually run the practice. It was a wonderful leadership experience having him beside me to coach and mentor and train and develop and point out what I was doing, a lot of opportunities for improvement, a lot of things I was doing wrong. So worked for John for many years. The recession hit in 2008. I took a break from the recruiting business full time, went back to corporate America as a sales leader, went to go work for Grainger, another great company, Fortune 500 company, great leadership, great training, great development, great mentoring. I had a wonderful manager there as well, a guy named Steve Bancroft, who was a great mentor to me and coach to me and a leadership developer. I did that for a few years until the economy kind of level set. And then I went back into the recruiting business because at that point I was, again, starting to get back into traveling and things. And so much of the recruiting business for me was work-life balance, to be there for my family. And in 2012, went back into the recruiting business, went back to MRI. And then in 2014, started my own practice. 2018, sold my practice to CRG, where I have been the last 6.5 years. And my practice essentially became the executive search division of CRG. CRG is a $50 million management consulting business. We've got 3 divisions. We've got the executive search division that I run. That's my former business. We have a staffing division that is kind of our legacy CRG business. And then we've got a managed services division based out of Costa Rica. And that was about 30 years in about 3 minutes. So hopefully I didn't share too much. Hopefully I didn't gloss over too much, but that's kind of my background and how I got to this point.
Well, I greatly appreciate that, John, because I now hope that our listeners and viewers get a sense of the depths of your expertise as we dive further into this conversation, because, man, you've done a lot.
I have, yep.
And you're still going and standing. So ultimately, that's a lot. That's a lot of insight. That's a lot of lessons that I'm hoping that we can definitely, as we converse throughout this session, just really share a lot that people can really glean from and be able to apply to even their own spaces as they further their leadership and become even greater leaders specifically. So, John, you really hit on a lot of things, and some of the themes I kept hearing was that family.
Yes.
Family, right? And I'm going to just ask you this question, knowing how important family is to you. How do you, from a leadership development standpoint, how do you connect leadership and family? Is there a connection at all? Is there any aspects of family that you pull from as it relates to leadership development?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very insightful question. Yes, there is a connection. There's a deep connection. My priorities in order are my faith, then my marriage, then my children, then taking care of myself so I can be a servant leader to my wife and my kids, and then my business that provides for my wife and my children. So first and foremost, the connection between business and the leadership roles that I have been in there have always been connected to serving, protecting, and providing my family. The second, I think, connection would be just as I strive to be a servant leader in my marriage and in my home, that same principle, that same mindset is vital in my workplace, to be a servant leader to my team, to my clients, to our candidates, being in the executive search business, and always starting with that particular mindset, servant leadership. And ultimately that flows from my faith. As I mentioned to you, kind of the faith, family, self, work. I strive to be a servant leader because my faith as a Christian, I try to model the leadership that Jesus displayed when he was here on earth. And I don't come by that naturally. That's something that it started with having faith. That my faith journey began about 30 years ago, and then really studying the way Jesus lived his life, then taking 3 years off of the business world and going and getting a master's degree in theology and further studying that, and then trying to flesh that out in those different aspects that I mentioned: marriage, family, self, leading thyself, and work as well. And again, I don't come by it naturally. Naturally, I'd prefer to be, like most of us, a serve me leader. So I have to work at that. And I've worked at it for 30 years, and I'm going to be working at it for another 30 years or however much longer I'm here on this earth.
That's awesome. That was very, very profound, and that was very insightful and helpful all at the same time in terms of how you just broke that down, even for me personally. So I really do appreciate that and the depths in which you explained that too. So with that said, John, as we now look at just the future of work, and we're entering a very interesting time in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen a lot. You've been in the space a long time. You've been an executive search person who's now an expert, in my opinion, and you've really seen the evolution, and you're watching the evolution take place. And I truly believe there's a paradigm shift that's also happening.
Definitely.
And I would love just to see from your vantage point and from your perspective, what do you see, or based on the changing landscape of the future of work, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I have seen a change, a paradigm shift in the last 30 years. I've had the privilege in the role that I'm in to either personally place or lead teams that have placed over 5,000 leaders over my 23 years in this business. And I've seen a paradigm shift. When I first got started in this business, there was still definitely a top-down leadership philosophy, a bit more of a dictatorial, hierarchical leadership philosophy, where the leader was the boss and everybody else was expected to fall in line. And the employees were expected to just be grateful they had a job, keep their heads down, and just do their work. 23 years ago, organizations were able to get away with that because it was a company-centric market. There were more employees than there were job opportunities. So you were expected to just keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and just do your work. And if you weren't, you're going to get replaced. That was the paradigm. That was the mindset of organizations in this country. Fast forward to 2024, that paradigm has shifted, and it needed to shift, and it is for the better for organizations and ultimately for humanity. Because today, unemployment is at an historic low. It typically is tracking around 3.6, 3.7%, which means everyone that's willing and able are working. And then when you look at certain disciplines, maybe engineering and more technical skills, we are at sub-zero unemployment, which means there's not enough people out there. So consequently, We have gone from a company-centric market to a candidate, or in other words, employee-centric market. Well, really, in many ways, the employees are in the driver's seat. There are statistics out there that demonstrate that in many disciplines, there are 2 to 3 open jobs for every one working, not unemployed, but working employee. So employees have choices now. So therefore, leaders have had to shift from a serve me mindset to a servant mindset. They've had to shift from being serve me leaders to servant leaders. They've had to shift from being the boss to being a leader that serves those that have been entrusted to their care. And conversely, the leaders that are the most successful in today's marketplace, in today's organizations, not only serve those they've been entrusted to lead, but they also have been required to be empathetic, dare I say, be loving. They've had to learn to be humble.
You're hitting on some stuff now.
They've had to learn to have positive energy. There's a lot of challenges in the world today, and they have to show up bringing the light. They've got to be positive, because the folks that they are motivating and trying to inspire and trying to get work done through have challenges right now. They've got fears right now. There's a lot going on, and that leader sets the tone. So they've got to bring that positive energy. They also have to have a sense of humor. People want to, we spend more time with our teammates, with our fellow employees, regretfully, than we do with our families. But that's just the world that we live in. It's not an inexpensive place to live, particularly in this country. And so therefore, that leader needs to do everything they can to make it an enjoyable and even fun environment for those that work for them, and bring some levity as well. So that paradigm shift has been remarkable to see, but it's also required that leaders today have had to develop a very healthy and very self-actualized perspective, and be servant leaders, empathetic leaders, humble leaders, loving leaders, humorous leaders, and compounded with the attributes that have not gone away. They still have to be a strategic leader. They still have to be a tactical leader. They still have to be a diligent leader. They've got to outwork the rest of their team if they want their team to work hard, first in, last out. They've also have to be visionaries. They also have to be innovative. They also have to be creative. They also have to have situational awareness, and have high EQ, have high IQ. It's in many ways become more challenging, because there's now that whole interpersonal component with the other expected components that make up a great leader today.
You're on a roll, man. Oh, it's so exciting when I know there were things I was going to ask you, and I was going to segue into the evolution of leadership from your perspective, and you've literally just gone through it for me. And I hope that everybody else caught it, because it was so good. It is so good, because you really just hit on how leadership expectations have evolved. Mm-hmm. That was going to be one of my questions to you, right? Yeah. And then you've also just hit on key qualities and skills leaders need in the modern workplace, which I was also going to ask you about. So you're really just flowing right now. And it's so awesome to hear, because I think with this paradigm shift and with the evolution that's transpiring, you're really hitting on real key points here, right? Because in my opinion, or from my perspective, and in my opinion, through, of course, just paying attention to leadership over the years and just with the corporations and just the workforce in general, we've always elevated folks to a place of leadership and a title that deemed them leader.
Yeah.
Without
Mm-hmm.
necessarily having them go through the process of being refined into a leader.
Mm-hmm. Well
Please
said.
stop, please stop me if I'm wrong here, right?
I agree. Mm-hmm.
And we're now at a critical mass where we're experiencing people shifting away from just the mindset of I'm going to keep my head down, as you already eloquently explained, where people are now challenging, or not even challenging necessarily. People are just saying, I am wanting to be in a place that views me as a person and appreciates what I bring to the table as a human.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's where the complexity now lies within the leadership in the previous model.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Agreed.
And we're seeing people exit companies at a rapid rate now, and people keep wondering, how's this happening? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
When in actuality, people either stick with people or they leave people.
Right.
Not necessarily the organization itself.
Agreed.
But at the end of the day, an organization is what it is because of the people that inhabit it.
Well said. Agreed.
How many people do we even have an organization?
No. Mm-mm.
Man, you just got me on fire. You really just lit me up. And I thank you for that because it just really hit on so much. So with all of those things said, John, what are your insights into how companies are adapting their leadership models now?
Yeah. So what I've seen is companies have understand that leaders are not born, but they're made. That's a significant paradigm shift. There used to be a perspective that leaders were born, and you put those natural born leaders in positions of authority. And just because they're natural born leaders, they're going to lead well. Organizations with the current leadership crisis in our country and leadership void in our country realize that leaders need to be developed. They need to be trained. And I'm a big fan of Jocko Willenick, former Navy SEAL, runs a leadership consulting business, has written a number of books on leadership. And one of the reasons I so appreciate Jocko is as a leader, if he made poor leadership decisions, men died underneath his care. If I make a poor leadership decision, we lose a sale, we don't make a placement, we have a downward tick in revenue that we'll fix. Nobody dies. I really like and appreciate reading books from folks like Jocko and the like, Admiral McCraven, Tim Kennedy, because when those guys they're still demonstrating leadership in the civilian life, but when they were demonstrating leadership in the military life, people's lives depended on them making the right decisions. And one of the things he shares in his book, Extreme Ownership, which is, in his opinion, and I would agree, one of the key attributes of a great leader is taking extreme ownership. In other words, not blaming others when things don't go well. If you're the leader, if something doesn't go well in your organization or on your team, it's ultimately your fault. You got to take extreme ownership, right? But Jocko shared a great story about him after having a lot of success as a SEAL, being asked by the Navy to oversee a SEAL leadership development program. And he agreed and began the process like any good leader would do to kind of do a gap analysis. Well, what's working now and what's not? And he was shocked to find out that the leadership development program for the SEALs, and these are men that are leading people into battle whose decisions are life or death decisions, it was a 1-week leadership development program. Jocko compared and contrasted that in an interview with McDonald's of the fast food fame that has a 6-month leadership development program at Hamburger University in Des Plaines, Illinois. He realized there was a significant gap. However, he also understood why there was a gap. There was a misunderstanding that because the SEALs were some of the most elite humans on the planet, based on the selection process to become a SEAL, there was an assumption that they were natural leaders. He concluded, based on his experience as a leader, that's not the case. He had to learn to lead. Those that he saw that were strong and the best leaders had to learn to lead, and therefore he shifted the mindset of the Navy and of the SEAL organization that we need to also train our leaders to lead. McDonald's gets it, we don't. We've got to, if McDonald's has a 6-month program, we should have a 6-month program and then some. And that really began his evolution of being a leadership guru and a leadership expert. And he's taken that, of course, to his podcast and books that he's written. So what I've seen, Armand, is that organizations are now understanding and realizing that leaders are not born, they're made. And just as you have to develop certain disciplines and skill sets, if you want to be an accountant, you're not born an accountant. You don't just show up and know how to do accounting. If you want to be a salesperson, you're not just born a salesperson. You don't just show up and know how to sell. If you want to be an engineer, you're not just born a great engineer. You need to learn how to be an engineer. Well, similarly, if you are called to lead, you need to similarly learn the art of leadership. And organizations are understanding that now and investing, I should say, the best organizations, quality organizations, organizations that have gone from good to great are understanding that they similarly need to train and develop their leaders.
Wow.
through programs, through leadership development courses, through mentoring strategy within the organization, through leadership consulting engagements, through accountability measures around their leaders, self-training, self-managing, through assessments like the actualized leadership assessment that you and I have both been trained on, and that's where you and I met, and the like.
That's awesome. That is so good. And I love your use of the art of leadership, right? Because it is an art form and it is something that's ever evolving as well. And it's something that we must fine tune and develop and work on even daily.
Right.
And it's even a day by day, even throughout the day, we're always working on it.
Right.
Really arrive or just get to the place of being a leader or the greatest leaders of all, So
right.
I really appreciate your use of the art of leadership because it's something that I think you keep putting things on the canvas, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's awesome. So with that, how do you or what is your specific approach to identifying leaders and cultivating future leaders?
Yeah. So I look, that answer is kind of multifaceted because we place leaders for a living, but then I also run an organization where I need to hire leaders for my own team.
Right.
And the approach is not all that different. So I am using that, the answer to this question I'm using in both facets, in both kind of paradigms, if you will. The very first thing is that I need to continually be self-training myself. So it starts with me. The only way that I'm going to be able to properly identify good leaders is I need to be a good leader. So I strive to continually be learning. I strive to have a continuous improvement mindset myself. So for me, that means I strive to have a number one, balance, and be balanced in mind, body, and spirit. so I can be centered and the best, show up each day as the best version of myself. I devour books about leadership, both reading them and listening to them on audio. I listen to podcasts about leadership. I am currently part of an organization called Vistage that is a leadership development organization that's about the price of my mortgage to join, but it's worth it. I have an executive coach through Vistage that coaches me and trains me on how to be a better leader. And the list goes on. So I try to surround myself with leaders that are further than beyond myself, and just seek mentors to constantly be improving. And I have a lot of improvement to do. I mean, we all do, right? We're all a work in progress. No one's arrived. And so number one, as I'm personally trying and striving each and every day to be a better leader. And then secondarily, I look for a holistic leader when it comes to placing leaders or hiring leaders. So I look for an individual that is I'd say kind of holistically demonstrating the attributes of a great leader. So first and foremost, as I mentioned previously, they have a servant mindset. Number two, they've got extreme ownership mindset. Number three, they've got a growth mindset. Number four, they're humble. They're coachable. They're teachable. They are continually learning and being developed, and they don't feel like they've arrived. Number five, they're empathetic. Number six, they've got a great sense of humor. We talked about that earlier. We need that today. We need a positive, hopeful, uplifting kind of mindset, and we need those that are in positions of leadership to demonstrate that, to kind of bring the light. But then conversely, I also look for leaders that can demonstrate the experience that has earned them the right to lead. Leadership's not a title. Leadership is an earned position that is to be revered and is to be honored and is to be held with fear and intrepidation, because organizations rise and fall, teams rise and fall based on the decisions that leader makes. So I look for folks that I would classify, quite frankly, as reluctant leaders. They didn't seek that position. They were asked to be a leader by their peers, or they saw a gap in a problem and no one else is stepping in to fix it, and they stepped in to fix it. So I also look for what I would classify as reluctant leaders. And then finally, I look for folks that demonstrate what have always been deemed as vital leadership skills. They are character-driven leaders, they are mission-driven leaders, they are purpose-driven leaders, they are visionaries, they have a strategic mindset, but they also have a tactical mindset. They can toggle between being strategic and tactical. And we've put together a very detailed, very involved, multifaceted assessment platform to try to extract all these things that I just mentioned to you out of a prospective leader, either for our clients or for my own team, which also includes assessments as well, like the actualized leadership assessment, predictive index assessment, and the like. So as I mentioned earlier, it is not expected by me that anybody is showing up as a natural leader. I want to find folks that have developed into that role and can demonstrate in a multifaceted manner that they are indeed a good leader.
So good. So good. So you've also already hit on other things that I was going to segue into and asking you about in terms of just the role of mentoring and continuous learning and development of leadership and just leaders in general. And you so hit on so much over there. So thank you for that. I don't have to ask it anymore. And then you are now familiar or have become familiar with this organization, new startup that's developing called Flexie.
Yep.
We've not only had conversations, you've been one of the biggest supporters and advocates in so many ways to propel and push this thing forward and even get it into spaces that are not familiar with it yet.
Yeah.
So my question for you specifically regarding Flexie, the platform, is how can Flexie's platform connect companies with emerging leadership talent specifically?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Flexie first and foremost because of the leadership. Both you and Will demonstrate the type of leader I've described through this podcast. And I won't go through the kind of character traits again because people are probably going to get tired of hearing me say it over and over again. But overall, you and Will are servant leaders, you're character-driven leaders, you're purpose-driven leaders, and you both are men of unwavering integrity who take extreme ownership. You've got humility, you've got a sense of humor, and you've got the proper priorities of faith, marriage, family, self, and then work. And therefore, it's why you have always both have been successful, are currently successful, and will continue to be successful. So first and foremost, I'm a believer in Flexie because I'm a believer in the guys leading the place, leading the organization.
That means a lot. Thank you.
But then the second reason I'm a believer in Flexie and what you all are all about is because of the platform that you've created. There's a great book by Peter Thiel called 0 to 1. You've probably read it before, but it talks about how important it is to create an innovative offering that solves a need that is valuable to humanity that no one else is doing. That is what you're doing. I have been in this recruiting space now for 23 years. I sold my company to a traditional staffing firm. Currently in staffing, which is the space that you all are becoming disruptors in, there are some gaps. One of those gaps is it's still very much a high touch endeavor. While we use technology, it's still used in a very, I would say, kind of inefficient manner, quite frankly. It's still a very high touch venture. You've got a recruiter that has to connect with a certain number of candidates, present those to a customer, and that one recruiter can only do so much, and they're human beings. And all human beings have inefficiencies, myself included. What I love about the Flexie model is that you all have created a platform that is extremely efficient and is using the latest technology to connect top talent with organizations, and in doing so in a very streamlined, efficient process, which is ultimately a better service model to the client, but also even to the candidate. One of the biggest complaints I have heard for 23 years in this business from everyone from a staffing contract candidate to a CEO is candidates get really, really frustrated because they feel like they see these jobs online, they apply, and they never hear from anybody. It's like a black hole, where your platform bypasses that kind of that black hole, if you will, or just kind of that kind of place, the netherworld where resumes end up and nobody ever hears from anybody. You all have bypassed that, where you're connecting a candidate through an app with a hiring authority instantaneously. And that is a game changer organizationally and from a business perspective. But then the deeper reason I love what you're doing is how much I believe it will help those that most need to be helped in our community, kind of the human element of it. I know you guys aren't money motivated. You guys certainly need to provide for your families, but you really want to help those that need to be helped, those that are struggling to find work, but want to work. And they're getting stuck in this netherworld of staffing firms or employment agencies or job boards. and they want to work and they're not hearing back. And so I love that you guys are connecting those that want to work, are willing to work. No job is beneath them, to opportunities with good organizations that pay well and will provide benefits and will provide a path to maybe getting a tuition covered at college, grad school, moving into leadership roles, and truly changing the lives of these folks that want better for themselves and for their families. And I know where that comes from, because that was your story and Armand's story, and you didn't have a Flexie. So it was a hard journey for you and Armand, or you and Will, sorry, to come from another country, not speak our language, experience the hardships of being, kind of an outlier and different, and speaking a different language and being from a different country and being a different skin color and not having the resources and means that others have. And it was a journey for you and Will, and a journey of heartache and suffering and challenges. But because the two of you are incredible men of character, you found mentors and you found a way and you found a path and you didn't give up. And both of you have been incredibly successful and achieved what you've achieved. And I know that both of you want to be able to fast track that for the young Wills and young Armands that are out there. So maybe they can get to where you all have gotten to a little sooner and get connected with the right mentors and the right organizations a little sooner. And I love that your business comes from a place of your own life journeys.
Man, I feel like I just end everything here because you really just explained not only our journeys, but just what we see as a need, not only something we could have benefited from, but seeing how there's so many people out here, younger people specifically, without excluding any older populations at all, but just today's generation of young people and the eagerness that they have, the want to be coached and developed, their want to actually contribute, more importantly, that people just seem to neglect and overlook and think that they're just lazy and entitled. Yes, that is the case with some, because at the end of the day, that's the case with all generations, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
But we're in a day and age where things are just getting way more complicated.
Yeah.
Even the whole normal ways of applying for jobs are just so much more complicated.
Agreed.
There's a need to simplify these things. There's a need to make it easier for people to just connect with opportunities at large.
Right.
And you just hit on everything that we're hoping for. And I think that we need to, at some point, pay you to even help us market this thing, because you really just broke it down. And I hope that people really hear this and they take from it the things that you just shared that are really the reasons why.
Right.
Because this all stems from why.
The why, as Simon Sinek says, it always starts with why, right? And you know your why. You guys know your why.
Always. So thank you for that. Now I'm going to shift over a little bit, now that we've talked about or just gotten your take and perspective on Flexie, in terms of remote leadership. Now in a digital world, as much as organizations are trying to get back into the workspaces and the buildings and all these things, I don't personally think that remote work is going anywhere. And I think it's a matter of time before it becomes even a dominant and primary way of work.
Right.
Even though there's still a resistance, because it's still in the early phases of any and everything, which we expect resistance. So with that, what are your insights into leading remote teams effectively?
Yeah, remote work is definitely here to stay. It was already emerging, and then 2020 and the pandemic pushed us forward into embracing as organizations remote work. There are certain disciplines that remote work doesn't work. I mean, certainly manufacturing, industrial, engineering, chemical manufacturing, biotech, pharma. There are jobs that require people to show up 5 days a week at some type of manufacturing facility, for example, or engineering facility or biotech facility. So there's going to be, and there are jobs that are going to require somebody to be there 5 days a week. That is a fact. However, there are millions of jobs that would be classified in categories that don't require one to be making something. They're more service oriented, maybe development oriented. You know, you can think of a software engineer or a IT support that can all be done virtually, or a sales role, or recruiting, my own profession. There are millions of jobs that used to require folks to come into an office that it's not necessary any longer. And in addition, as inflation continues to rise, the cost of goods continue to rise. Businesses are trying to find ways to reduce costs where they can. And one of the ways to do that is, if possible, a shift to a remote workforce. What I'm finding, Armand, is that most organizations have not gone fully remote. They were, and they've decided to come up with a hybrid with those that can work hybrid. So what I'm finding is that most best practice organizations are doing some type of a hybrid workforce. So it would be something like 2 or 3 days from home, and then maybe 2 days in the office, and then the office is collaboration and cultural creation and those types of things. The key, however, is in so doing, it is vital that organizations have a virtual leadership strategy. And we all saw in 2021, many organizations, myself included, didn't have a effective one. And we had folks on our teams that were taking full advantage of the situation. They're kind of the quiet quitter phenomenon that we read about in 21 and 22. So it's vital that, like anything, organizations need to be purposeful about how they're managing virtual teams. So some practical examples that I've seen our clients do, and then quite frankly, I'm doing. I've shifted to an entire virtual team because it's a better ROI. Number one, you need to hire people that are self-managers. If you're going to go to a virtual workforce, you cannot hire people that are going to require a micromanager. It's not going to work. Those are going to be your first people that require micromanagement, that are going to be the ones that are out, on the golf course at 2:00 in the afternoon when you think they're working. So you need to do everything you can to strive to hire demonstrated self-managers. Number two, you need to have a key activity measurement / KPI, key performance indicator driven environment. Key activity measurements is essentially the same thing as KPIs, just sounds less threatening. I like that term, but it's really the same thing. So these virtual organizations need to be led not by personality, not by politics, not even by browbeating and persuasion. They need to be led by defined key activity measurements for respective disciplines. And teams need to be held accountable for those, starting with the leader and the rest of the organization. The third thing is there needs to be multiple touch points throughout the day and throughout the week with these virtual teams. And I found that, as my executive coach, Dave Surface, likes to say, breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. I found if you do some of these things that I'm going to talk about here in a moment, these touch points, you actually can find that your team will be more efficient than they were when they were all in the office together, because you're having to be more efficient, having to be more purposeful. So one of the things I found that's very important, Vern Harnish in his book Scaling Up talks about a daily huddle. I think it's a great idea. Have a 15-minute daily huddle Monday through Friday with your team. Jocko Willenick in his book Extreme Ownership says a leader should never have any more than 3 direct reports. That's quite a statement, but certainly the assumption is a leader won't have any more than maybe 3 to 12 direct reports. So each leader in their respective subgroup should have a daily huddle, according to Vern Harnish. And wow, Teams, Zoom, what a great way to do that. Have a daily huddle Monday through Friday, 15 minutes long, agenda driven, the leader's kind of facilitating, and it needs to add value to the team, whatever that looks like for each organization. But in those environments, it's vital to show up, have a plan, focus on, kind of the day's work and the week's work, and then and do that every day. Another thing that's really important is in addition to a daily huddle, organizations led by the leader should have a weekly team meeting. And in that team meeting, the leader needs to remind the team of the mission, purpose, vision, values, and celebrate the successes of the team. This is not the place to call out people that are underperforming in front of their peers. There's nothing more deflating than that. This is the place to celebrate success, celebrate the performance of the team, and celebrate those that are demonstrating the core values that you as a leader are trying to cultivate in your organization. And that means everybody, not just the sales guys. That means the administrative assistant that's demonstrating servant leadership, humility, integrity, ferocious work ethic. Elevate them, give them a Culture Warrior Award. That's where you do those types of things. Another way to motivate and lead virtual teams is also to have a virtual all hands call with the entire organization. So this goes beyond those kind of sub teams, and this would be CEO, COO, leaders of the entire organization, and that could be as many as 1,000, 2,000, 30,000 employees, having a 30-minute virtual all hands call and really going all out for it. So you have everybody invited. You use a reliable platform, something like Zoom or Teams, reliable internet. So you're using an Ethernet, not a Wi-Fi. You're using proper broadcast techniques that include proper lighting and proper audio visual, having a microphone, a proper background and setting. And the leaders of said organization are similarly recasting the mission, the purpose, the vision, the values, celebrating successes across the organization, celebrating promotions, celebrating new hires, also celebrating referrals. When somebody refers somebody to come work for your organization, celebrating that, creating a referral culture. It's a wonderful environment to accomplish, kind of ultimately continuing to move in that direction that the leaders want the organization to move in. And then celebrating those successes of as I mentioned earlier in the subgroups of everyone within the organization, somebody in engineering, somebody in janitorial, somebody in security, somebody in sales, somebody in, finance, that are demonstrating the core values that the organization is striving for. So those are a few examples of some very specific actionable items that organizations can take to lead, inspire, motivate a virtual team.
That was so good. I have to end here, and I have to let you get back, or else I'm going to keep you for a whole nother hour, and I don't want to do that to your day or to your folks that are expecting you to show up and lead them. Well, John, thank you so much for this. This was more than I even thought and expected. And you've even given me a lot of things and gems that I call it. You've given a lot of nuggets and gems. They're mostly gems that I even personally will be walking away with and even doing my best to implement even more so, just based on the sheer depth of your answers and just the level of insight that you shared. And just I geek out over all things leadership personally. And then when I'm with a leader who is very seasoned and has gained and gleaned and learned so much as you have, I have so much to just go back through. And I'm excited for that, and I thank you for that. Flexie appreciates you. I truly appreciate you. I love you. I know Will appreciates you, and we are grateful for you. So, John Binkley, thank you for joining us on one of our first episodes of FlexieCast, The Future of Work Unleashed. And I do expect this to be one of our best episodes.
Well, thank you. I've had a lot of fun. This has been great, and I'm honored and privileged, and really appreciate both you and Will. And I am I know you got a lot of fans, but it put me in the category of some of your biggest fans. I'm a raving fan of the two of you and your leadership and the organization that you all are building.
John, you're more than a fan for us. You're actually one of our biggest supporters.
Thank you.
And we need that even more so now than ever. So thank you so much for all you do. I salute you, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person, sir.
Thank you, brother.
All right. See you soon, big brother.
Good to you, man.
All right.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of FlexieCast. Join us again next month for another episode.